Welcome to the Rest of Us podcast. We have no guest today. We're doing another solo one. Lucas, you're never a guest. He looks at me. We started naming this a solo podcast. He's so offended. My husband is here co-hosting with me today, which is not guesting, it's co-hosting. We had a guest, and then I swapped out for another guest, and then that fell through. Still probably going to be a thing, but anyway, we ended up, this is perfect anyway, because you guys know I normally do a solo podcast when I am on a competition weekend. Funny enough, it was a competition weekend. I did not compete. I injured my wrist over a month ago, and then I was worried that it was fractured, possibly because it just really hurt in like a sharp way. It started feeling better for a few weeks, and then it started to not feel better. So I contacted my doctor, and she had me come in. She took a look at my wrist and was like, it's probably not fractured. She did all the jiggling and the stuff that they do to check the joint.
Says you're a weak tit and you can't fight.
Something like that, yes. Also, she said, put it in a splint and don't move it. Sleep with it. She was like, okay. She was shocked that I had injured it over a month ago. So that was a little concerning, but she was like, if you put it in a splint and you leave it alone for 2 weeks, she's like, it might take 4 depending on how bad you re-injured it when you were still sparring. And so I did that. Also, I can't take NSAIDs. That's how you say it, right?
I have no idea.
Ibuprofen.
Yeah, I could say ibuprofen.
Yeah, it's like NSAID, non-steroidal, anti-inflammatory, whatever. I can't take that because I have really bad GERD, and you're not supposed to. It like gives you ulcers and makes your stomach bleed. So I told this to the doctor, who knows this because it's in my record, because she's my regular doctor. And I was like, oh, because she was telling me, she's like, have you been taking like any ibuprofen? I was like, yeah, remember the stomach thing. She's like, oh, yes. But apparently the stuff that you use for arthritis is NSAID cream. So she's having me do that on my wrist instead. And she was describing it to me because there's a dosage card. She's like, you have to use the card. She's like, you do a certain dosage on your upper body and a certain dosage on your lower body. And I was like, I looked at her exactly like I'm looking at you now. And she was like, it's okay. When you open the package, it's very self-explanatory. It'll make sense. And it did, actually. There's like a card, and you like squeeze the tube out over the card, and then that's how you know how much to dose yourself. And you rub it on your skin, and you're supposed to do it 4 times a day. And apparently it like helps. I'm just glad I don't have an allergic reaction, because I almost have an allergic reaction to everything. So I put it on, and I was like, and then it was fine. So
that's good. Yeah.
So if you didn't know that was a thing, because you're a person who like doesn't want to orally take those, there's a cream that you can use. And so I'm doing that as well. Did not compete, did not attend the competition. And then I guess one of the things Lucas and I are going to start doing is we've opened ourselves to having more guests. And we're taking our podcast and you're gonna be seeing podcasts on location. It's something that we wanted to do for a while.
Yeah.
But now we're actually going to go do it, because honestly, this makeshift studio of mine right now is like the worst place you could do a podcast.
I mean, it's technically the same thing as if you were just to show up anywhere else and then just like, well,
yeah, we don't have like good soundboard stuff.
Yeah,
We don't.
I mean, like, if we're gonna keep the consistency, like we might as well just go to people and make it easier for them, and at least have enough people that are. Want to be on the podcast and are happy to be on it. It'd be fun.
Yeah, we have
make it simplified for them guests.
We live in a concrete building, so there's no worse location to be doing sound than we currently are in, with the 3 cats and all the stuff. So this will be cool. I told Lucas, because sometimes I occasionally get asked like what our podcast equipment is, and I'm so embarrassed to say.
It's what works.
It is what works. So it's so bad, actually. So
there's a ton of editing because we have enough equipment that's like, it's just none of it's like streamlined compatible. So we just have the stuff that's miscellaneous to get good quality sound, okay video, and then we could just sync it up later. And which is just, it ends up spending, we do an hour long, and then it ends up being about a 5 or 6 hour process to make it at least viewable on Spotify. So hopefully we can get to the point where we don't have to do that. But I mean, it's just, if it's going to be the same thing every time we do a podcast, so you might as well just go to 2 people. And
yeah, I will describe my workflow. If you wanna comment in the comments a better way to do this, I would love that.
Yeah.
But I'll describe it just because it's cheap and easy to do, and it developed this way because I use YouTube to like figure out how to do things. and I took combinations of YouTube.
YouTube
videos.
University.
Yeah.
Why you?
Why you? Why me? So we have very inexpensive microphones.
They're like $80 a pop.
Yeah, 80. I thought they were 60. Maybe they're 80.
They're 60 or 60 or $70. $70.
Yeah, they're very inexpensive microphones. They come with the cord. I think these ones you can actually use as USB or the
XLR.
audio XLR.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an option. And then we have it plugged into a Scarlett box.
4i.
A Scarlett 4i. And the reason we have that is because there was also a YouTube video, and that was exactly what the guy was using.
Yeah. Also, need I remind everybody, if you get the Scarlett 4i and you have the microphones, your headphones need a headphone amp. So you have to buy a separate little tiny box that you have to plug your headphones in, because for some reason, when they record everything, the audio in your head is so low that you can't hear your own voice. You're literally buying another piece of hardware to be able to at least hear the sound when you're talking, so that you know if you're spiking the mic or if you're speaking too loud. So
Yeah, and our sound check consists of, when we're doing this, we talk into the microphone, and then we see if the levels clip when we first test it
We got an HM4
as the amp.
That is the amp, yeah.
None of this is sponsored, so you can rest assured that we're not
Yeah,
saying this
I'm
stuff.
not saying this because
yeah, this is actually the guy.
paid.
What's that electronic store that we go to? The one here in Georgia, the one that we bought all this stuff at, with the really friendly people. It's like the place that we bought these mics from.
I bought most of our stuff from Guitar Center.
No, the other electronic store, and it's like really a random. It looks like it's from
Micro
the 80s.
Center.
We went to a Micro Center.
Micro Center,
yes.
yeah, we did buy it from Micro Center.
And we asked some random dude, and you'd be surprised.
He did really well. Like, he did it very well.
It's like old school what Best Buy used to be like
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago, or Fry's back in the day
Yes,
too. Like
yeah.
it felt like that, but it's a Micro Center.
I completely forgot that I went to Micro Center for this. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple times because
Well, he also said, he's like, well, if you're wanting to do it like this, he's like, it might be easier to do X, Y, and Z. I was like, bro, let's do baseline. And then he was like,
we're dumb.
here's baseline. This is where you are. He's like, it's the cheapest one you can do. He's like, if you wanted to go like a step up, and I was like, at the time, I already thought that we had done a step up. It didn't work out. I'm like, let's just start from the bottom, and then I'll work my way back up. Which I would suggest to everyone, if you're doing a podcast, go as cheap as possible. Like, get an iPad, you can get a 2i2, which is instead of the 4i4, which is the Samsonite thing that we're using right now for the interface, and then something that does an amplifier, like a small amplifier that's like $50 or $60, and a good set of headset, and then just do the podcast. And then as you go, you're like, okay, so you can see how it grows upward, and like, all right, well, okay, cool. Like, this system integrates these two hardwares, and then if you're successful at it and you want to keep doing it, then it's pretty easy to just upgrade from there.
So a little bit of context that Lucas didn't mention is we had bought podcast equipment, I think, like straight out at almost 2020. I want to say it was like 2021. Mm-hmm. And we had like a 4-mic setup. We had like a Rodecaster at the time. And the mics that we had were, I want to say, condenser mics, because these are dynamic mics.
They were.
So dynamic picks up more of everything, but the condenser mics, like they're almost like a shotgun mic that you like speak into, and it's a little bit more focused. Mm-hmm. So the problem with that setup that we had 3 or 4 years ago was we got this weird feedback pinging because we didn't have. Was it also an amplifier? What were we missing?
It was like a reducer.
A reducer.
For
the
actual
opposite.
microphone, and because
of the types of microphones that we had.
And they're like, technically, the system works together as long as you have the reducer, but the reducer was like another $400.
And the Rodecaster was already like, the whole setup was already like
$800.
$800, yeah. So
for 2 mics with like a cheap stand too.
And it worked. Like, we did it a few times, but then there was a couple times that we had people over and we spent like an hour and a half trying to get the pinging to stop.
It just took forever.
And then when we took it back to the Guitar Center, this is back when they used to like buy stuff. I don't think they do the same way anymore.
They still do.
They still do.
They'll take trade-ins.
But what what ended up happening is when we went back to Guitar Center, they were like, oh, actually, this is like a year or two later when we're like, I guess we're not ever going to do this. We had it like sitting in a tub forever. And then we just like did not get around to podcasting. And so when we took it to the Guitar Center, because the thing that Lucas and I have learned about electronics is if we don't use something, and because I'm a photographer, if we don't use something within 6 months, 7 months, we get rid of it because technology depreciates so quickly that we would rather just get rid of it. And then when we're ready to do the thing, like buy, it's not the most, I guess.
It's not cost effective.
It's not cost effective. It's very wasteful, but also less wasteful than if you're just in denial and hung on to this old generation thing and let it depreciate more.
And also, like, we try to get as much information from friends as we possibly can. And even though there are a lot of people that are in sound and things like that, like, they're not necessarily doing podcasts.
Yeah.
So when they give us the information, like, you have one person who has just a ton of money to be able to buy whatever they want, and then they're like, hey, what's the best I can get? And then they buy it, and they're like, it works. I'm like, why does it work? Like, how do you know? Like, I don't know. Someone just came in and did it for me. I'm like, all right, well, that doesn't help me because I don't have...
The other thing, too, is, like, you don't know what their editing workflow is.
Yes.
Which is very challenging for me as well because, like, if you are somebody who has, like, Lucas and I have PC stuff for the most part, and we use Adobe. I've been using Adobe for... video and photography things for almost like 15 years. So I'm not good at it. I'm not proficient, but looking at the tools that are on the programs are so similar and so familiar that if I were to switch to any like DaVinci or some of the other things that people use, it's like learning a whole new thing.
Yeah.
And so that was going to be a challenge. So one of the things that we started with, our first 3 that we did, for the Rest of Us podcast, we had used one of those softwares that they're like, you can just plug in your USB mics and then like there's like all this like AI stuff that'll get rid of like noise and whatever.
It doesn't.
So we tested it. Like we got USB mics because I was like, this seems simple. I have 2 USB ports in my laptop. So I was like, screw it. I'm just going to get these USB mics, and I plugged into my laptop on both sides and it worked. Like, and this, even setting that up, like according to the directions, was so confusing. Like I could only hear my own voice. I couldn't hear the other person's voice. We couldn't mix it, even though it was like all this software that you're paying like a monthly membership for.
And they're like, but both of them are being recorded at the same time. I'm like,
well, then
okay.
I was like, well, now that we need to do all those other things, I might as well have just bought the stupid box.
Yeah.
So
because you're paying for software that you could have just bought the hardware and not done any of that.
Yeah, if you look at the clip, there's like a really old clip of me and Tang. I think it was like either episodes 1 through 3. It's like one of those, and like his ears off so we could hear each other, and it was just, we were doing it. The other problem was because we couldn't hear both of the voices in it. Mm-hmm. There was really bad mic bleed, and we are not sound people, so mic bleed is where his voice comes into my microphone because it's so sensitive, and then it sounds like an echo unless you gate the noise down, which is if there's different levels, I'm speaking at one level, and then the voice that's further away is more quiet, and then so you can get rid of all of the sound below that level. But the problem is if my voice drops below that, it sounds all clippy. So it was a mess.
So if this sounds like foreign language to you, this is why you end up buying at least a mid-grade level equipment where you don't have to deal with that, and you have mics like this where it's literally specifically facing towards my head, and I'm talking straight into the microphone.
Yeah, so that was like the first, like after the third one, I was like, we're not using the software. We're just going to buy the box and do all the things that we should have done. Yeah. And so it was fine. You canceled like a $15 a month thing. It was stupid. Because I was like, okay, if I have to go through all of this to fix, because at that point I was like, okay, I had to go and like fix the mic bleed, which was a lot of tutorial searching on YouTube to make, because you.
So and then when you're doing that much work, to me, I'm like, all right, well, how much do you want to make an hour? I'm like, because even if you were working at anywhere and you're making $20 an hour, if you spent 4 or 5 hours doing that, there's your first 4 or 5 hours trying to fix mic bleed and everything else. You could have just worked a shift at anywhere and
then paid someone to do it.
And then paid somebody to do it. Or you could have worked 3 or 4 shifts and then bought the hardware. You don't have to do that anymore. Yeah. And also, so you're just saving time.
I hit a point where I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to be using like Adobe Audition to get rid of the mic bleed, then what's the point of using this other software? And I told them that when I canceled. They're like, why are you canceling? I'm like, well,
I'm still getting rid of something that you guys said that.
And it was worse because I had to take their weird file because it recorded into their software.
It did, yeah.
So I had to like take their weird file, import it, change it to like a WAV format or something normal.
Oh, and it just turned into hours and hours of YouTubing how to export from this software to Adobe. And then change
the format.
And well, you can edit, but you can't edit all the things. And you're like, okay, great. So this just sucks.
And I have no sound experience.
Yeah.
And also, I know you can hook this up and you can record directly into Audition. However, I cannot find a single video on YouTube that can explain this concisely in a way where I can look at it and I'm not scared of losing everything that I did.
Yeah.
So
messing up a file, audio file.
Yeah.
You're like,
so what we ended up doing was the easier tutorial that was more user-friendly was using GarageBand.
Yep.
And we discovered...
Shout out to GarageBand.
Shout out to GarageBand. We discovered if we just plugged the box into an iPad and used GarageBand, which comes on the iPad...
For free.
We were like, the iPad's like a $400 solution, and I don't have to worry about the space on my computer, my laptop, or like Lucas's desktop. We also have like this very, very large cloud, like home cloud. That's just the Lambs cloud that we also could, like, I move stuff off of that. So I put things on. So this is where it starts to not make any sense. But I'm going to tell you what I do because maybe this speaks to somebody who's also an idiot with sound.
Oh, I've done this, but I actually figured out a better way.
Yeah.
Let us know.
So we plug the box in, the Scarlett that has the amplifier. It's connected to the two cheap mics into an iPad. The reason why my podcast is an hour long is because you can only record an hour on GarageBand.
Yeah,
so
that's it. It's max.
We thought that was a sign that, you know what, the perfect length is less than an hour. Every time that I've had to go longer than that, we just stop everything and then we start another file. We slate it because I used to do film stuff and like slating is just like something that we do. The one time I didn't, I almost had like the last 14 minutes of it to be just a little bit off. And it's fine because I wasn't doing video back then. But now I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to clap it in just because, just to have it all aligned. So we record it. We record the files into GarageBand. The video is Lucas's cell phone and my cell phone pointed at us. Yep, sideways. We have two cheap ring lights that I had anyway because I do acting and I use them for auditions. So we have two cell phones that are on for the entire hour, and then that's how we have those files. So then, this is also where it doesn't make any sense because the workflow is just inefficient. I export the audio tracks off of GarageBand. There's a little headphone next to each of the tracks because we record it on like two separate tracks. I hit the little headphone, and then when I export the song, I send it to my cell phone.
Yeah.
Why I do that is because I can't get it off of there any other way.
Yeah, because every time we try to go, like, everyone's like, oh, just plug in your iPhone to a PC, and then you can just drag and drop when you open it up.
Yeah,
but when you open it up, you open up the folders.
Yeah.
And then none of the folders are dated properly.
Yeah, it doesn't want to.
The dates, like, you are literally just scrolling through hundreds and hundreds of video and photo files, and all of them are registered the same way. So you could spend about 10, 15 minutes trying to find the file you're looking for to transfer over. And then when you transfer it over, you could be transferring for about 20, 25 minutes. And then all of a sudden it'll be like, error.
Yeah.
Didn't complete.
Apple doesn't want to work with PC.
Yeah. It's such a nightmare. It's such a nightmare.
So I export each track off of it for the first like 10.
But I have to interject. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, yeah, there's a software for this. What is it? $75 a month?
Yeah.
No, thank you.
This is also, like, we already pay for Adobe because I have to use Lightroom and Photoshop for things. And then Lucas uses, like, Acrobat and, like, other things for his business.
PDF stuff,
PDF stuff. So we already have, like, the whole Adobe suite. We've probably owned it for, I think, like 10 years now. Like, every single year we just pay the stupid membership. So we already have Audition. It doesn't cost us anything extra. Apparently they're, like, making, like, an Adobe for Podcasters thing that's, like, in the beta format. But we're like, whatever. We're going to do that this way. So I take the little tracks... and I export them by isolating each track, which is like you hit the little headphone button and then you export the song to and I just send it to my phone. Like I airdrop it to my phone. So that's how I get it off of the iPad. And then I send the next one. this is where it also doesn't make sense. Then I WeTransfer it to myself
Yeah.
because I don't know how to get it off of my phone onto my laptop. And I also have WeTransfer, which is also another stupid membership, but that's outside of the point. I also use it for photography things in the moment that it is. I don't want to be doing this.
So how many
this
memberships
way.
do we have just to be able to transfer?
So far, the only thing we're paying for is Adobe, which we already pay for, so it costs us personally nothing.
It still comes through.
Yeah, and then WeTransfer, I think, is $14 a month, which is way too much because I could be paying for
and then
a
on top of
photography
that,
delivery site for the same price.
Right.
So I have WeTransfer.
The cats are big
I
fat.
was like, what does that sound? We have automatic cat feeders that changed our lives. It sounded really weird through here. So if you guys were like, what was that? So I WeTransfer it from my phone to my email address. Then I take it from there and download it to my laptop. Are you laughing because this makes no sense?
No, it's funny because you're like the cat noise. You're like,
You made the noise
I
first.
know that, but you made it funnier than I did.
Thanks. He flirts with me. So cute. Okay. Anyway, so you made me lose my train of thought on my really messed up workflow process.
Right.
So then I take these two little files, I download them from WeTransfer onto my laptop. I stick them in a folder that sits on my desktop. And then I do two functions to them in Audition. I run a hard limiter, and then I also run a tube model compressor, which keeps the levels. So I put each track and I put the levels in between, I think it's like -12 and something. I don't actually know how this works. I just watched a YouTube video, and this guy had like 6 or 7 steps. He was actually a video guy who was showing you how he does audio for his own movies and stuff. And I think it was labeled for podcast, but his background is film. And he's like, I'm not a sound person, but here's what I do. And I'm like, perfect. Because when you get the sound guys, they really know what they're doing. And I'm like, I'm not doing all that. I'm not getting rid of lip clicks. I'm not doing all that kind of stuff. Because someday, hopefully, this will be a successful podcast, and I'll pay somebody for that. What?
Yeah, I mean, also the lip click thing. I'm like, you can just get a shittier mic and stuff, and not deal with it.
You can literally go on Upwork or Fiverr and find someone for $5
we don't have lip
stuff.
click on our stuff because we don't have super.
No, lip clicks is when we go, and
I know,
yeah.
but you don't really hear that.
Oh yeah, you do. I do because I edit it. All these people probably. People don't notice
on
it.
Spotify, I don't hear it. So whenever you post it, I mean, maybe you're getting rid of it when you're doing it.
Yes, there's a point where I was getting rid of them, but then I was looking at the time to cost thing, and I was we're
gonna spend an extra 4 hours doing that, but
ideally, hopefully we'll pay people who do this for a living, and they have that 10,000 hours behind them. But I don't have that right now, so I will.
It would take them 15 minutes. It takes you 2.5 hours. It makes sense, why you would skip it.
Yeah. So I run tube model compressor, which keeps the levels on each track. When I was doing it to both of the tracks, this is why my first 10 episodes don't have as good of a sound as the recent ones, because I was doing it as one audio track because I was like, we're just going to work with what we got. But when you run a tube model compressor and the sound levels aren't perfect between the two, this is where I would get more echo, and I couldn't get rid of the echo and have issues like that. Mm-hmm. So what I'm doing now is now I'm doing them separate, because all I have to do is send them off of GarageBand by isolating the tracks instead of sending it off. Normally you would just export the song, but if you click the little headphones on each track before you export the song, that's how you get the two different tracks isolated. Okay. But if you look up how do you isolate tracks on GarageBand, that's the Google search. That took me forever to find. Yeah. So then I was
isolate tracks on.
Yeah, sometimes you just need the way to be able to look it up on how to do it. So tube model compressor, hard limiter. I don't really have to change the settings. The tube model compressor, it was I had to change it to -12, and then there's a ratio that's 3:1. There's a YouTube video I watched. This is how I got that function, and I realized out of all of this guy's 6 tips, after watching all these other videos on Audition, I was like, these two things make it sound clean enough. Enough for it to be functional. Is it perfect? No. So I do those things. I save it. At first, I was saving it in a way that was unnecessary. There is a way, if you know how to use Adobe, to work out of Premiere and then it goes into Audition and then out of Audition and floats between the two. I don't know how to make that work properly. So because I've not spent the time to try to figure it out. So because I didn't want to, but I learned that and there's a way to work in multiple tracks. I also don't do that. I literally clean up each track and then I stick the 2 tracks in Premiere because I'm more comfortable in Premiere because I've done more video editing over the last like however many years to do stupid little audition videos or like whatever it is. I know enough Premiere that's why I operate in Premiere. So then I stick the 2 audio tracks in Premiere. I take our 2 video files that I export using WeTransfer. I just take them off of our phones and I WeTransfer it to myself and I download it onto my laptop and I stick the 2 .mov files in there and then I highlight everything and I sync it. And so that way the audio tracks and then I delete the audio from the video and then it's just the audio that's like cleaned up and has like balanced levels and
Synced
stuff.
on,
And then I cut the little video from there. Before I was doing video, which is recent, everyone knows, I think that's like the last like 6 or 7 episodes I've only done video on Spotify. Before that, I was still using Premiere for the audio because I know how to like slice things in Premiere. I can't figure out how to do it the same way in Audition. And I was like, I don't feel, and every time I watched a tutorial, these sound guys are just like, they either are going too slow. They like start with like, and then you open Adobe Cloud and click the Audition. And I'm like, okay, this is too slow.
Yeah.
Or they're like so high level that they're in something and they're like dragging and dropping and it's like something they're used to doing and they like never said what that shortcut key was or something. And then all of a sudden you've like watched.
They always leave it out. The one, they're like going, and then you just go here and then they just skip over it. And you're like, what did he do?
Yeah, there's like, it's weird because there's like either videos where there's like a certain level of knowledge you have to have, or there's other ones where it's like, we're never going to get to the thing that I need to do.
And then you're like, I'm watching 15 minutes of, I don't even know if they're going to get to what I want to look at. And then you're like right one step before where you're like, okay.
And they're using a tool in a way that you don't understand.
But then they're one step before it, and then you're like going, okay, here he goes. He's going to do it. And he's like, and that's the end of my video. And you're like, dude, no way. I just wasted 15 minutes, and you're not going to finish the last step. I've done that so many times with just everything.
I hate
so
that too, where you're like, you've been following along, you're like 6 minutes into like an 8-minute tutorial, and then you hit a part where they
just graze over it or not even give you any detail on it, and you're like,
I can't go to the next thing. And sound is so like using like a whole software I don't really know, and then like you're looking at like sound waves. There's just like so many things that I'm like, I have no desire to do this if people can understand it. Like that's all I need. I'm like, I just want it to be the way that like you use iMovie or like use Premiere, where you're like, I'm just slicing this and I want this in here and I don't want this, or I'm going to cut this out. Like I just want it to be easy. So then I do that, and then I just export that. I was just exporting the audio file because I was only like editing the audio on there and like cutting stuff out, like lip clicks and like other little things like that, and fading things in and out, which is like bare minimum like Premiere stuff. But then now I export the whole video file. And then I take my whole folder of all these large files, because the 2 .mov files, and then
2-3 gigs a piece.
I think it's like 6.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like I think the two video files for an hour is like 12 gigs, and then the audio files are a lot smaller, but it's still kind of a pain. So I send those to myself, and then once that's in like a folder, we have our like giant house cloud. Then I send things off of my laptop after I'm done and post everything onto the cloud thing. So that way I don't use all this storage on my laptop.
Yep.
So that's how I do it. It doesn't make any sense. But people will ask me like how I do it.
That's also because of the equipment that we have.
It's the equipment that I have and how I know how to do things.
Our next step up would be from where we're spending, I think this is like, I don't know, like $600-700 to get this podcast set up, to the next step, which is $3,000.
Yeah, if we had to add everything up, how much are the headphones?
So these are about $60 a piece.
The headphones are $60 each.
These are about 60 or 70 a piece. The microphones. The
Scarlett.
The Scarlett's about $400 or $500.
I thought it was like $250.
No, it's like
okay.
$400.
$400. How much is the amplifier?
Amplifier's like $60, $70, and then the cords are about maybe $20-30 a piece.
And then also
so
the
iPad. How far
was $400.
Yep, our iPad's $400. So I mean, like, what are we at? Like around $1,200-$1,300. Now there are now they have newer systems that you can get, like a lot of it integrated. That also includes like video cameras, things that when you record it, you have a software that just records everything onto one, so it eliminates all the editing and extra time that you're going to spend on it.
Or the files and stuff like that.
And it usually just goes into one file, and it syncs itself and kind of you just got to know how to operate those like few
Yeah, so
softwares.
Spencer and Curtis, who did the submission series, they have like one of those multicam
Yeah.
podcast. If you look up multicam podcast system, that's like the one that's available on the market. It's
Right.
very heavily sponsored. So like every video is going to be like, oh, you're doing a multicam podcast. This is what you buy. They really saturated the market with their stuff. So that is an
works
option.
great.
Yeah,
But it's just expensive. It's not a cheap thing to do.
yeah, it's because you're paying for multiple cameras. Also, my understanding from Spencer is he told me that the files are not crazy large, and he like streams directly basically onto YouTube or something for what he was doing for the submission series. So I haven't tested it out, but that's one option. Because I will say the worst part about everything that I've done is not so much the editing and the whatever, it's the transferring the files in this like workflow that doesn't make sense, and it's just like wrangling data after 30 episodes and you have like at least 12 gigs every episode, it just adds up to being a ridiculous amount of data.
It's tons.
That you have to put somewhere. So that's been like a big challenge with it. You can also get like better lights. You can get like the booms that you like because when you hold it, there's going to be like the sound of the cord. Sometimes I'm cutting that sound out, sometimes I leave it in and you guys just hear it.
I don't think you can hear it right now, but
Mine,
you can hear this.
one of them, it makes the noises. I don't know which one it is, but every time I'm editing, I'm like I end up having to cut out some of that.
Yeah.
So there's things like that. Yeah, and then obviously you'd like do the clips, and I do the captions in Premiere. Some people use CapCut, and that kind of thing. So it just depends on like what you're, I guess, more comfortable with. But that was like our big startup. One of the other things is I have a couple cameras. I have a vlogging camera by Sony, and I have my 5D Mark III, my like 12-year-old camera that I take all my photography photos with. The reason why I've not set up doing a camera instead of doing the cell phone and then recording the files is I don't know about the vlog camera, but the DSLR has like a 30-minute file limit. And I was like, not about to deal with that. I don't know how people do it. I think they set up the same way that you can like hook up a cord to your camera and like take photos.
They'll do the same thing with video.
And then it like puts, when you like automatically imports like Capture One would like do this. This is how fashion photographers work or like whatever. Things can like streamline into Lightroom. There is a way to stream like through the camera. I just don't know. I think if you go through like the cord, it's not an issue. But the whole reason that there's a file limit on DSLRs is this is like the dumbest thing if you've never heard that this is why that there's like a file length limit. I guess there's some law in Europe that's really old that if a camera records a certain amount, it becomes a camcorder, like file length, and there's a different tax on it. So the reason why like my DSLR has like a 30-minute limit or whatever the limit is.
I was trying to stay within the standards of the country that it's made out of.
I don't know if that's a thing anymore. That's why I've never actually played with the vlog camera because that's a new camera. I don't think they ever changed like that law unless, the last time I read about this is like when I started doing photography. I was like, why am I like filming all these little like 5-minute clips? Like why is there such like there's a limit?
That's fair.
Yeah, but I think that when people do this, my understanding is like they're kind of just using the lens of the camera and then it's like recording through something else.
Yeah.
Kind of like if you're like recording on stuff, you could put it into a Zoom recorder or you could put it into something else.
Yeah.
So I don't know enough about all that. So that's one way that you would have like your, better video if that's like something that you care about.
Yeah.
But what's nice about our kind of really cruddy setup is that we can actually just go travel more and see people. And
because like our boxes are very small.
The boxes are small.
I could probably fit all this in a backpack and then the two things that the lights come in.
The lights have little bags. They're cheap. They're lightweight.
Yeah, it's not super bulky.
Yeah, so I guess.
But everything else, like it comes down to having a actual soundboard that you have to take with you. When you have to take the soundboard with you, you got to be worried about the buttons and
the
dials
arms.
and the
Remember
arms.
the boom arms were like a huge thing that we had to take.
Like it took up so much space. I have the entire crate, but this would all fit in a backpack and the two bags that the lights come in. Mm-hmm. And our phones are always in our pockets, so it's not like that's.
Yeah, we have kind of messed up a couple times where we didn't have the iPad charged, and then we didn't have. The phones charged enough to do it.
iPad charged at 25% will do an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, we learned that because it just sits there.
And it's at the max that we really need it for. Oh my God. If we wanted to, we could just charge it for 15 to 20 minutes and get another hour, 2 hours of podcasting out of it. So it's nothing much.
Yeah. From then, I'm like, now with like mic bleed, this is another reason why I liked the way that mine and Tang's was originally the format of our face. It wasn't so much the side of our face.
Yeah.
But the reason that our setup is like this and the cameras are where they're at is because if Lucas and I angled more towards each other, the mic bleed would be a lot worse. So
mic bleed's bad, and the light starts to bleed off into the lens so that you can see like a big glare on one side of the camera.
Yeah, and if we actually just like completely faced it like with good framing, like it's funny because I know so much. I know everyone's like, oh, it looks fine. But I'm like, I know so much that I'm like, I would never frame like a cinematic shot to look like either of this, even with like the crap in the background and the whatever.
Yeah.
But this is actually all to accomplish good sound, which is the primary goal. And then also, the way that we have the ring lights and the phones are inside the tripods of the ring lights, that would also get all messed up if we like completely faced it with like good framing. Then the ring lights would get in each other's way, and then you're like looking through the lights at each other. It just wouldn't. We've tried a couple different setups, and we're like, this is
just the best.
Fine, yeah.
It works for now.
But
and
theoretically,
until we get better equipment, and then we have to change the actual angle of stuff and the sounds and the microphones, because hopefully, something where we can like pull the mic in, and then you don't have to touch it. You don't have to make any noises.
And then also, like, hopefully going forward in the future, too. I'm like, if you did all this, if you followed this and you're like, okay, I got the box, I have the amplifier, I have headphones, 2 mics, cell phones, GarageBand, and you can get the audio files off and then you can get the video off, you could theoretically send that instead of we transferring it to yourself and editing, that you could send to somebody on, like, Fiverr or
and
Upwork.
then be like, hey, I need you to fix this and...
I want multicam editing and I want you to like fix the sound or whatever. You could probably do that and like not have to do any editing or anything of that I just described. But that would probably be the easiest, quickest way.
Also, then it goes into like how many episodes are you gonna do? How much money are you gonna put into that? Because if you really wanted to, like there are setups where you can just get everything to streamline into one audio file, one video file, or at least one audio and one video, and then all you have to do is just sync up the sound, and you're like, you don't have to spend too much time on it. Yeah,
when we had the Rodecaster, I had just like done one video of like me and my friends. There's like 4 of us sitting at a table, and there was like no like cut back and forth, and then we just had like the sound that recorded onto like a micro SD card.
SD card, yeah.
And that was fine, and it sounded great. Other than the weird pinging that we'd occasionally have.
It would like ping.
Yeah, but it sounded relatively balanced, and I don't remember having to do a lot of audio processing on it. I actually would just remember like maybe throwing like a denoise filter and then like maybe like a de-reverb on there, and there was like nothing. Reverb is like the sound like that bounces off the walls in concrete, and denoise is just like the regular noise in the air. But I actually don't even do that to my files right now, and it's been fine with these little dynamic mics. So I used to only do that, and like with the Rodecaster, it was simpler, I guess, in that kind of way. But we had so much more troubleshooting in the middle of actually talking. Like when we actually recorded it, it was like a pain every single time. Like it didn't have this crazy workflow and all this stuff, but and we really didn't do that at all. Like we played around with a bunch of friends. It went nowhere. We never even opened up like a Spotify or anything. And then the way that we do that is we're using what used to be called Anchor. It's like Spotify for podcasters. It's free. And then you can upload your stuff to Spotify, and you can also send it to like Apple Podcasts and everything else from like your free Spotify for podcasters account too. If you're wondering how to like actually put it on the internet.
Yeah.
That was weird. I remember we had some trouble getting onto Spotify originally because Lucas has our main family account, and you're using like your regular Spotify to throw things onto the internet. It's weird because apparently Anchor used to be like a separate company, then they bought it. So even logging into it, I was like logging into the wrong one, so I couldn't get into it.
Yeah.
So I had like uploaded 2 or 3 episodes, and then I was like, I'm just never gonna log out of this on my computer. And then my computer updated, and I was like, oh god, it logged out.
Like,
and then I couldn't get back in. I was like, I knew I needed to figure out how to do this, so that I like didn't get around to it.
It's an uphill battle when it comes to login stuff, because like they make you do like administrative stuff, and then make you do like your regular account, and then whenever you're trying to be like, hey, give me a free account, I don't need it to be associated to my main account with the family. I just want it to be a administrative thing.
Yeah, I just like make it like a business. And then I made like a new email address because I'm like, I'm going to make a podcast email address.
Yeah.
Violated like the terms of like either
did.
Google, like everything was messed up because it was like, you can't have like a new account. So you're like,
It's just
fine.
a battle so much. And you're like, guys, can I just try it first? Like, give me a break
Yeah.
here. Let me try something. And if it's working, we'll transition over to this big, group thing that you guys want to do where I'm like, I have to be registered as this big company that I'm now doing a podcast.
Yeah. And you guys had no idea that it was so much work to do so little. And like, you're going to sit here and like
23
learn,
episodes in.
23 episodes. Some of them are throwaways. Not really. All of them are very valuable to me. Some I'm more excited about than others.
It's a learning experience.
It's a learning experience,
yeah. You
and
go
then
to anybody else's
scheduling.
podcast, they started at episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and they're just as bad as the rest of them. Like, they're all going to be bad. Just do them. Get through it, and then just do your research and keep learning and keep trying to do your best.
That's my biggest recommendation, at least for consistency. I can't talk about the success of the podcast because it's not like I'm out here making millions or anything. But I will say that what we learned from when we spent all that money and bought an expensive system and the right mics and like all the things, because we're really going to go at it like that, we actually ended up not really being able to doing anything. And like we ended up not being able to consistently put out stuff. And this time when I committed myself to doing a podcast, I was like, I'm going to at least put out one every single week.
Get good sound and
for
video.
1 year. I am a podcaster now. And I was like, whether I get a guest or not, whether my guests fall through, because we can only actually film these.
Or your guest is a nobody.
Or so like we can only do these when Lucas is not working, and so that like limits us to 1 day a week at the moment. Now that we're gonna try to meet people where they're at, we're trying to open up the rest of the week and like work on that, which will give us like more opportunities and stuff. That I will say, like, we got too focused on having, good equipment and then having like our table set up and like making it look like what people who have like millions of dollars to pay people do to make, a podcast look a certain way. You can rent podcast rooms and like you could pay people and you could do all that kind of stuff, but also are you going to be like nervous during that hour because you're a little bit stressed out that you're like trying to get everything done? Also, we had so much troubleshooting. One of my first couple guests, my friend Tang, my friend Kenny, are both in the film industry. So they like both have done a bunch of photography. They've done sound stuff. So they know things go wrong. So when I had them come sit down, I was like, thank you for being on my podcast that has currently no listeners and it's brand new. I'm so sorry if I lose everything from this episode, because there's nothing worse than like getting someone to like take time off work, drive to your place, sit down, you have a magical hour with them, and then something got messed up.
And then you're like all of the audio is gone.
Yeah, or like, clipped. Like my episode with Tang, it's like just clipped in certain spots. And
it was
like,
such a good episode with Tank too. Like, it's so disappointing. I mean, I'd love to have him back on the show so we can actually do it this way.
And we all knew what we were doing because we've all had to go through the troubleshooting.
It's tough, and he was there for it, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate all of my guests, like, who have come onto this podcast thus far, because everyone knows, like, it's newer. It's not going to have a ton of listeners, and they still took time out of their week to sit down and like talk on this podcast, and everyone, treats me like very wonderfully and like professional, and like it's just been the support that I've gotten from everybody who's helped me out thus far. Beautiful. I'm like so thankful for. Yeah. So that's
Thanks,
also
guys.
One of the really beautiful things about doing your own podcast is you realize, oh my God, I have like so many wonderful people in my life that like don't mind coming on my podcast and like helping me out, because that's how I see it. So when you're starting to invite people over and like they're taking time out of their week and maybe sometimes their work week to like sit down and give you their time, you just want like, okay, please God, I just like don't want any technical difficulties. And even like, oh, thank God, when Caitlin came, the first time Caitlin came, our cord died. And we couldn't even record that night. And me and Lucas had actually randomly had recorded an episode that I wasn't even going to publish, that we ended up publishing.
So we had to.
Because we had, and I was like, thankfully we had.
And, like, we had like one thing that we did, and like the cord just died, and like this is like the weirdest thing. Like a cord can ruin the entire episode.
Yeah.
You set everything up.
You have no backup stuff.
You got no backup equipment. You got no backup hardware. And I'm like, this is hardware that you're like, I don't have an extra XLR mic, and the USB is not going to work because the USB runs one line in, and you can't record a USB with another USB on certain hardware. Long story, but you have to have XLRs running through your system to be able to run two mics at the same time.
Yeah.
Who knows that?
Yeah. And thankfully, again, close friend was over, and not like someone that I'm like, hey.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, like someone who's just like, well, I don't really know you guys, and I'm just coming over to do the podcast. So at least somebody were like, okay, dude, sorry, I'll fix this tomorrow, and we'll go back in, a couple of days from now and do another podcast. So.
Yeah. So that's been my whole learning experience. Hopefully, if you're like maybe considering doing a podcast, you got something from that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't expect you to do the same wacky setup. I just was like, everything on the internet when you look on YouTube is like sponsored. So you're never going to be like, you're going to be looking at like some dude with like a light that's like $1,000 and it doesn't even look good. Like they don't even know how to do lighting. Like you look at it and they have like massive shadows on one side of their face and you're like,
that. And then like, they're also like, they'll sit you and they'll point you in this direction with all this equipment. And then you go and you buy it all. And then you still run into the problems that we just talked about.
Yeah. You'll still have mic bleed.
How do you get rid of mic bleed?
Your mic just dies.
Why do my headphones not make enough noise in my head when I'm hearing somebody talk? Or why is there a delay in the microphone to the headphones? And you're like, you don't know this stuff until they go, oh, by the way, we left this out, but you need to get something for an amplifier for your headphones to be able to hear the microphone. Yeah,
the amplifier for this, and then the reducer for the Rodecaster.
For dynamic mic for the Rodecaster.
No, for the condenser mic.
Yeah. But the Rodecaster
But I'm just saying, these were the two weirdest extra things that nobody mentioned on the internet.
They'll sell you $1,000 in equipment, but they won't tell you, oh, by the way, your sound's going to be shit because these mics that are sold together in this combo actually don't go together on the system. No one told us that. But now Rodecaster 2 has the condenser, like a reducer inside the board, the soundboard, so you don't actually have to buy that anymore if you get the newest one. But if you get an older one, you do. And it's just like that older one was the same like to get that reducer was the same price as the actual board. So then you might as well just bundle it all, sold it all, and then go back out and then bought one that's the newest Rodecaster 2, and it has everything in one. You don't have to do all that.
Yeah,
it's like we're trying
all I wanted to do because of this first experience that we had when we bought all the nice stuff, that everyone like had recommended.
That doesn't work.
That it's just. I mean, it's technically user-friendly, and then it's not if you, like, literally know nothing.
Yeah.
So now I'm looking back and I'm like, okay, now that I have this background, I could easily make that work.
Yeah.
Now. This is way later.
Because we learned enough off of the basic stuff.
Yeah. And I even remember this when I was doing photography and I was starting to shoot with, like, external lights. Like, no one told you to buy the stupid little thing that you could stick. There's, like, you buy a light stand, but then there's a tiny little, like... $10 piece that you use so that way you can mount a hot shoe to it.
Yeah.
That like you just have to like go through,
They all flash at the same time. And
but no, the way that there's like almost like that round ball that's like sitting right there on this tripod that you mount this to. There's like basically something that's like that goes on top of a light stand.
Oh yeah.
That then you put your flash on top of that. But you like if you just have a flash and a light stand, you can't make it work together. You need like an extra stupid little $10 piece. Nobody tells you. But nobody tells you
about it. They're just like,
And then even when they do tell you about it, and then you go to like go buy it, and you like look, and there's like 1,000 options, and you're like, well, which one of these stupid little devices fits on my size light stand? And then you have like a skinny light stand and a fat light stand.
And they're like, do you have a 1/8 or a 1/4 inch? And you're like.
And this is why when YouTube tells you when people do YouTube videos that are like sponsored or whatever, and they're like, here's everything that you need to buy to be able to produce what I did in this video, you don't even care. You're like, I'm gonna buy it all because at least it's gonna work.
Yeah.
You think.
You buy all the way
through?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, if you tell me this light stand, this part, and this flash together,
Here's
I was
how
like.
you put it all together like a puzzle.
Yeah.
And then click this button and it works. And you're like, deal.
Yeah, and then you'll read in the comments.
I'll spend $2,000 to make this work.
Truly, and then you'll read the comments, and someone's like, "You don't really need that. You could just do this or any kind of." And I'm like, "Bruh, I am not doing all that."
Don't listen to the comments, man.
But then once you do it one time, and then you have it, and you see what it is, then you can be that same person.
But then at that point, you're a video and sound guy,
and you didn't need the video.
And you're like, I don't need the video anymore because I already know exactly what I'm doing here. I'm like, and then you don't spend any time on their comments and any time on the videos or making your own. So then you're just off on your own, actually being successful at your stuff that you're doing.
And I just remember doing this too, like with the photography, and I was like, okay, now how do I stick an umbrella on this thing? Like, I just remember like, okay, I have all the things. I'm looking at them like, there's no place to put this. So I just remember this like from 12 years ago, how challenging that this was.
Yeah, it was tough.
But this is the way that it is. There's so much info bloat on YouTube, unfortunately.
So much.
So there's just a lot of people selling stuff, and then there's just a lot of people making 10-minute videos for the hell of making a 10-minute video with 3 minutes of information that you actually need. And then you're sorting through all these 10-minute videos for 3 minutes of information that you need.
Yeah.
And all of them is just, it's like reading a food blogger's recipe. Like everything is just like, okay, well, we didn't need this, or like, here's the intro, and then we get to
I was
this.
born on a farm in 1983.
Yeah.
My father had 3 fingers on both hands, a war wound. So
Yeah.
it's
So
crazy.
hopefully, I guess if you are not interested in ever starting a podcast, then you tuned out a really long time ago. But if you're like, wow,
and you don't have to torture yourself with this type of work.
yeah, hopefully though, I mean, if you listen to this whole thing, if you are on YouTube or Spotify or watching a clip on Instagram, I would love for you to comment, and I would take any tips because I'm gonna have to get rid of WeTransfer, and like I need to stop having more than 12 gigs of data every single time I do an episode. So eventually, and then when I have a new updated workflow, I'm definitely going to let you guys know.
Oh, for sure.
Like and subscribe.